Welcome to Prepper Nation. I'm John. Thank you very much for being here, shooting a quick thumbs up or thumbs down, whatever, hitting subscribe and helping me fight censorship. Truly appreciate it. And thank y'all for tuning in to the video this morning. It was a bit of a circus behind the scenes between myself and the platform that we are on right now. But that's another conversation for another day. I want to talk this afternoon, if it's okay, about a major advantage. Some good news here, son. A major advantage when it comes to SHTF prepping. And this is also hopefully going to answer a question that I see quite often, and that is, how do I convince my spouse to prepare? How do I get my spouse, my better half, if you will? Maybe you're not married, you're just dating somebody, and you're trying to get them on board. How do you get them on board? So that's the topic this afternoon, and I want to start with the approach. All right, because the approach matters. All right, I'm often talking about, hey man, don't go overboard with the airplanes, and I catch heat for these comments, by the way, and I understand. Don't go overboard with checking out airplanes online, and maybe don't invest all of your time into aliens. That conversation, nukes. I've often said, that kind of stuff drives revenue, uh, but it doesn't really help you out a lot. I get it. People are interested in airplanes, tracking planes. People are interested in the conversation when it comes to nukes and aliens. I'm saying don't lead with these topics. If you are trying to convince somebody to get into the uh, preparedness mindset alongside you, this is not how you want to lead in. You don't want to sit them down in front of the computer and say, "Okay, honey, check out all of these planes. This is why." They're never going to understand it. Okay, you need to lead with a practical argument. You need to try for 5 minutes. It's hard. I get it. It's hard to put yourself in the shoes of a non-prepper, because once that switch flips, it's hard to go back and think like a non-prepper. But you have to understand that's where they're at in it right now, and you have to kind of put yourself into their position. Okay, um, practical stuff like, honey, have you noticed gas stations don't always have gas? Sometimes there are bags on the pumps, or sometimes they limit the amount. I mean, you can look, take your lady or your man friend or whatever you got going on, son. And like for me, I would take Miss Nations on board. Uh, God bless her for it. But if she wasn't, I would get her out of the car one day while I was pumping gas, and I would point to the screen. I would say, "Look, honey, we're only allowed to get X amount of gallons. I wonder what's going on here." Um, you might lead in with inflation, and you might say, now is the time to prepare for the inflation to come, because we know prices have went up astronomically, and shrinkflation is the big deal and stuff too now. But what is it going to look like a year from now, 2 years from now? You understand what I'm saying? Stuff is going to cost more 2 years from now. So get it now. Save yourself some money. That's kind of a practical argument. Take them online to the government prepping websites. They are set up. I know y'all don't like these agencies, and I'm with you on that, but they do have checklists online that will tell you the basic stuff that you need to get, and you can explain to them, look, our government is encouraging this. All right, so let's go ahead and start here. Um, you can do, and I haven't completely done this, but I have largely done this because things are getting hectic, right? You can replace a hobby that you have that is taking money with prepping. You can say, okay, look, here's what I did. It's not costing us any extra money. For me, I quit buying the higher end video games. I'm hugely into retro games, for those that don't know, but I have a Neo Geo, and I backed off from buying games on the Neo Geo because they are hundreds of dollars a pop. And instead, now I can focus more so on prepping stuff. And I can go to my wife and I can say, hey, it's not costing us any extra because I was spending money over here, and now I'm spending money over here because I think this stuff is more important right now, which it is. And finally, just take it slowly. Don't overwhelm your spouse. Um, Not really an analogy, but more of an experience thing for you people. Most of you, myself included, have dealt with burnout or the grind of prepping. You just sometimes you just get worn down from the nonstop, constant barrage of bad news plus, prepping, right? And we're in the preparedness community. So imagine what it would feel like for somebody who wasn't entirely sold on prepping. Don't bombard them. Take it slowly would be my advice. The prepping lifestyle can be overwhelming. And I'm going to catch some heat for this, but I'm prepared for it here. Hand holding is okay when it comes to family. I know a lot of you don't like the concept of hand holding, which basically means taking a non-prepper, taking care of them, walking them as far as you have to until they finally see the light. I don't think in 2024 we need to be doing this with the average Joe and James out here. They haven't woken up by now. It's on them at this point. But I think with family, it's different, especially immediate family, spouse, maybe children. Maybe you're an empty nester and your children just aren't listening. So maybe this is how you get them on board, right? Not necessarily a spouse, but hand holding is okay. Taking it very slowly and explaining why you're doing what you're doing or why you want them involved with prepping. Um, because I believe, as the video's titled, it is a huge advantage during SHTF and prepping for SHTF if your spouse is on board. Um, I usually, excuse me, when I see this question, I'll see it from three different groups of people. All right. Most of y'all fit into one of these three groups. All right. Number one, your spouse forbids it. They're not prepping. They don't want you prepping. I've actually seen people say, hey, man, I might be headed for the big D because of this. So I don't know. Every situation's different, but there's a group out there where your spouse just will not allow it in the home. There's a second group. Many of you have dropped this in chat and stuff and said, my spouse is not prepping, but they're okay with me doing it. They're okay with me doing the heavy lifting. They look at it like one of my hobbies. And so I'm handling my business. And then finally, the spouse is on board. And that's a huge advantage. When your spouse is on board, it really does matter. And it really does make a difference because think of it like this, okay? Now you have two sets of eyes and ears. When you're out in public, when you're in a grocery store, for example, okay? And I'll give you an example here. Sometimes Miss Nation will come up to me because she has a trained eye for this stuff now. I got onto the prepping first. It didn't take her too long to understand why it was important. She got on a few years later, just as the pandemic was starting, before it was actually a pandemic. She got on board and she really pays attention, especially to the groceries. I'm looking at other things. I'm looking at tools and hardware. I'm paying attention to gas stations. Are they running out? Are they starting to severely limit? I'm looking for things like signs that say no cashback. Well, this is weird. Why is this happening? Why are pharmacies now closed 3 days a week? It just makes no sense, right? But she keys in on the groceries and she'll come to me and she'll say, John, I noticed this. And sometimes it's just they don't have people to stock. Okay. Dairy, for example, the other day, she's like, man, there's almost no milk. Is this a big deal? And I get to look and I'm weird like this. I'm looking through the cooler and I can see crates upon crates of milk. They just haven't stocked it. But other times, she will catch stuff that is either doubled in price since the last time we saw it, or she'll begin to see holes on shelves that really don't make sense. Everything else is well stocked. And I'm like, well, that's a good sign. So it is a huge advantage to have two people in the mindset of preparedness, both watching, both listening. She's talking and listening to people at work. She can kind of gauge where the normies' minds are at, if you will. So it does matter. Um, Prepping, you can the stereotypes for prepping. Let's just say the stereotypes in most of the TV shows that cover doomsday prepping, they're ridiculous. That they make it seem like we're crazy people and we all have tinfoil and we're all chasing airplanes 24/7, right? And that's just not the reality. Again, I get that it's some people's deal, and if you enjoy it and you're also prepping, who cares? That's your business, not mine, right? But we're just made out to be crazy people. And so that's why I say when you lead in with a spouse who's not on board yet, you don't want to lead in and feed into the stereotypes. You want it, again, you want it to seem practical and not lunacy. You know what I'm saying? You don't want it to be hoarding. You want to go in with purpose, and you want to explain, hey, prepping is about safety and security. You can explain this to your spouse. Situational awareness right now is paramount. All right. You can explain this to your spouse and also your kids. Daily news tends to always be bad stuff, right? We know this in this community. And again, it's one of the reasons that we get worn down after a while, but it can also be a resource. You can sit down, you can watch the news with your spouse and or your better half. And when a story hits that deals with prepping or could be avoided with some sort of prepping, you could explain to your better half, this is one of the reasons that we prep, so we don't run into a situation like this. We're going to be able to avoid that. You can explain prepping as disaster insurance, as many of you have said countless times probably, but that's a practical argument. You have house insurance, you have auto insurance, you have life insurance, you have health insurance, you're saving for your kids' college maybe, and you're doing this in preparation just in case. So you can approach it from that standpoint and say, hey, we're going to do this a little bit at a time, just in case. Just in case we have a weather event. Just in case there's chaos in 2024. Use extended family to your advantage. A lot of y'all going to be like, what are you talking about? Listen to this. So we hear this argument quite a bit. I know where I'm coming when it hits the fan. When things break down, I know where I'm coming. And most of y'all, I'm pointing fingers. Most of y'all are going to be like, you ain't coming here because your extended family knows that you're prepping, right? But you can turn this around. You can use this to your advantage if you have a spouse that's not preparing. So you can explain to your better half or your spouse, you can sit them down and say, look, I noticed that your sister and her husband are saying that they're coming here when it breaks down. And you can tell your better half, that's okay. It's okay if they come here, but if they're going to do that, if that's the plan, we need to both be preparing for that. We need to make sure that we are as prepared as possible when they get here. So you can actually use these freeloaders, right, to your advantage to get somebody on board with prepping, because they may think you're crazy or they may think you just have a useless hobby, but I promise you they care about their sibling. And if they've heard their siblings say they're coming to your house, they might get on board with it. I don't know. It's just a thought on my opinion, but 2024 is the perfect time to try and get somebody on board. When you get right down to it, if you have that spouse that's been reluctant to get on board with you, 2024 again is the perfect time, because chaos, chaos, chaos every single day. This morning we just talked about all of the chaos this past weekend. Terrible, right? Horrible. Glooming and dooming this morning, but I'm more positive this afternoon because you can use that to your advantage. And you can sit down, you can say, sweetie, honey, whatever you call them, whatever you call them, baby doll, this is why we need to be doing the prepping together. and explain to them it would be a lot easier if we were both on board and we did it incrementally. And again, it's going to save us money in the long run, not cost us money. Most importantly, have fun. Have fun with it. Getting into the burnout again for a second, I think people begin to burn out because it gets monotonous. You know, people are just doing it because they have to do it, and it becomes more of a job and less of a hobby, less of an enjoyable thing at some point. And you're a prepper, and you felt this probably. So if someone is not a prepper, they're going to burn out a lot quicker unless they're having fun. Find a way to make it fun. You know, sit down with your spouse and say, you know, you're an excellent cook. You know, can we explore canning maybe? So we can put some of this excellent food that you're making, honey, baby doll, so we can can some for the future. This would be a huge deal for us, and maybe get them on board in that way. Because at the end of the day, if it's miserable and people aren't having fun, they're going to lose interest. And that applies for anything, but especially I think it applies for doomsday prepping. Make it fun, make it enjoyable, make it something that you can do together. Spend some time together. You know, everybody's not on their cell phones, maybe. Maybe just that in itself is appealing to the spouse. I don't know. But hopefully this chat helps somebody out there out with getting a spouse on board. Don't get discouraged. Keep trying. You know, don't hound them. Don't beat them over the head with the concept every single day. Throw it in every so often. When you're in the grocery store, oh man, they're out of this, or they're getting very low on this. Oh man, all the bags on the pumps over here. This is not a great sign. Again, the news and stuff like this, chaos. I think personally that not all non-preppers are totally blind. I think that many of them deep down know our society is in trouble. And again, I know I'm going to catch heat for the hand holding, but when it comes to immediate family, I think it's okay to hold their hand a little bit until they figure it out. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Y'all take care. God bless.